I've just gotten done with quite a bit of patterning through my Beretta A300 Ultima Patrol, and I wanted to share the results here. I shot the Hornady Critical Defense 8-pellet double-aught buckshot through the shotgun, Federal's 8-pellet FliteControl, and then I used a standard control load of a 9-pellet nickel-plated double-aught buck. I wanted to see how much each of these shells would open up at varying distances, and I also wanted to see what the perceived recoil and recoil feel was like, as that is something that does matter for a lot of shotguns, especially non-auto-loading shotguns that have a little bit harsher recoil. There are chapters listed in the description down below if you wanted to jump ahead to certain loads, but I would appreciate it if you stuck around throughout the entire video. Let's talk about the shotgun before we get into the ammo itself. The shotgun that I use for testing is my own personal Beretta A300 Ultima Patrol. Aside from bolting an optic and light and extra ammo and a sling to the shotgun, it is internally stock. I have not monkeyed with any of the components, nor am I using threaded chokes on the shotgun. Beretta ships these shotguns with a 19-inch improved cylinder barrel, so they generally shoot pretty good from the factory. That said, every shotgun is its own unique specimen when it comes to patterning, and I wanted to see how well mine does. I do have previous patterning through this shotgun here on the channel, but nothing as scientific as what I'm going to show you here. So let's get right into that patterning. What loads did I use, and what were the parameters that I set for the testing? These were the three loads that I tested in the A300. We have the Federal FliteControl 8-pellet double-aught buck, advertised as moving at 1,145 feet per second. The Hornady Critical Defense 8-pellet double-aught buck, with an advertised muzzle velocity of 1,600 feet per second. And then my control load, which was a Fiocchi 9-pellet nickel-plated double-aught buck, moving at 1,325 feet per second. These two loads are the real focus of the video, but I still wanted to compare it against a fairly off-the-shelf 9-pellet double-aught buck. All fairly normal stuff there. For the actual testing in the field, I shot each of these loads on a clean target at 6 different distances. So I have 6 targets to show for each of these loads to show the patterning. I shot at 25 yards, 20 yards, 17 yards, 15 yards, 10 yards, and 7 yards. Those are all fairly normal distances, but I can already hear a couple of folks saying, why is 17 in there? Why not just do 20 to 15? I have a 17-yard long hallway in my house. I have no idea what the builders were thinking when they did the floor layout for it, but I have a super long hallway in my house, and I like to test the length of that hallway for patterning, because realistically that could be a shot that I have to take. I did all of the shooting in a single range session on a single day, and admittedly I had to leave a little bit sooner than I wanted to due to poor weather. So let's get right into the first load, this Fiocchi 9-pellet buck that is acting as the control load. So how did the control 9-pellet load do? Go for a center shot here, give it a go. Shoot. As a control load, this Fiocchi 9-pellet double-aught buck did exactly what I expected. I've always found 9-pellet double-aught buck to pattern generally pretty poorly out of most shotguns, and unless you have something that's been backbored and then worked over by Vang Comp or is heavily choked, 9-pellet always throws a flyer. I'm throwing up all of the photos here of the various patterning, but at 25 yards, I couldn't even keep all 8 pellets on my big target. The number 9 pellet went somewhere into the ether. As such, I had to measure a little bit differently for that, but generally speaking, the patterning was not great, but it was precisely what I expected. The positive here is that with this being the control load, it can only get better from here. Let's get over to the next load. I wanted to take a quick second to thank all of the viewers of the channel. Without your support, this would be a lot harder to get done. All of the testing takes a whole lot of time and effort, but having folks that are here watching and commenting and liking or even disliking the videos does make it a fair bit more satisfying for me. If you did want to financially support the channel, there are a few ways in which you could do that. I've recently opened up the channel memberships here on the channel with 2 varying tiers that have their own perks set up. Those 2 tiers relate back to a phrase that I've always enjoyed from Ken Hackathorn, which is that OPA, aka other people's ammo, is the best way to shoot. Any sort of financial support through the YouTube channel memberships will go right back into paying for things like ammo for my various testings here on the channel. I also have a Patreon that has a free tier and a paid tier to join, which lets you get some behind-the-scenes looks at what I'm working on. We also have an entirely free Discord that you can join, which I'll link down in the description below. Let's get back to the ammo testing. The Hornady Critical Defense 8-pellet double-aught buck. This load did really well in my shotgun back in 2024, but how did it stack up in 2025? And pure. As the phrase goes, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. The patterning for this load wasn't amazing. I actually had better results back in 2024, the last time I tested this, through the exact same shotgun. I do think that some of the reasons why it's so inconsistent can be chalked up to the feet per second, as there is a decent chance that the pellets are actually hitting each other with that higher velocity when they start to leave the wad and the shot cup. I wouldn't be too surprised if that was really the reason why. It could also be just some variance in going from lot to lot for the Hornady Critical Defense. But I do want to try out the other Hornady loads that they sell that are very similar, like the American Shotgunner, and I think they have a Hornady Black load that is also 8-pellet double-aught buck. I'd have to see the velocities on those, but I do think that the higher velocity here did lead to some of the more poor patterning. Especially the fact that we had some patterns like at 20 yards where it was 6 1/4 inches, but then we move 3 yards forward and it opens up 2 inches. Just kind of baffling there, right? Now, did this load have excessive recoil? No. Since our payload is a little bit lighter, even that extra velocity still leads to very, very minimal recoil. And when I say minimal, I mean minimal compared to other 12-gauge loads. But all in all, I still stand by the Critical Defense as a good home defense load, especially in my shotgun where I've tested it. But I would like to see it do better, and I'm really just wondering if it's the feet per second that caused that. Let's get over to the 8-pellet FliteControl so we can see the magic that people talk about with that load. Federal's 8-pellet FliteControl double-aught buckshot has an almost mythical reputation when it comes to buckshot loadings. How did it perform in my A300? It ain't often that things live up to hype, especially when it comes to gun-related things. But I kind of feel like I've rubbed the genie's lamp and had my wishes given to me. This 8-pellet FliteControl worked better than I expected. The patterning was utterly fantastic at every single distance, and I'm very happy that I managed to actually score some of this stuff because it performed so well. I ended up running out and buying a second case of the stuff after I did my testing earlier in the week. As such, I'm very, very happy with it. The perceived recoil was minimal, the patterning was utterly fantastic, and of course, no reliability issues. But I also had no reliability issues with any of the loads I tested as part of this testing, and I didn't have any problems with anything here. Let's get into the comparisons. The testing has been done and the results are here. It's not too surprising that the 9-pellet double-aught buckshot performed kind of poorly, and it's also not a surprise that the Federal FliteControl did as well as it did. I will say that I am disappointed by the performance of the Critical Defense, and I don't know if it was maybe just that this specific lot was a worse performing lot, or it could be that the higher velocity just leads to more of the buckshot pellets bouncing into each other as they're flying through the air in the shot cup. But all in all, I was kind of unhappy with the performance. But I still trust the ammo. These two stood head and shoulders above the 9-pellet, and that's the important thing. Now how about some math to really show you how much better these two loads were than the 9-pellet double-aught buck? Talking numbers, it's fairly simple. I took the mean dispersion for each load and pitted them against one another. The Critical Defense was 30.1% tighter patterning than the 9-pellet double-aught buck, and the Federal FliteControl was 64% tighter patterning than the 9-pellet double-aught buck. Comparing the two better loads, the Federal FliteControl was 48.2% tighter patterning than the Critical Defense. All in all, this shows that these are both much better than the 9-pellet double-aught buck. However, the FliteControl is significantly tighter patterning. If we want to do the inverse, it's pretty funny for the 9-pellet double-aught buck because it patterned 276% worse than the FliteControl and 143% worse than the Critical Defense. Not too surprising, but again, this stuff just really ain't that great for a lot of uses these days. And that concludes the testing. In an ideal world, I would have done 3 rounds of each of these loads at every distance, but the time and the poor weather were certainly constraints on the day I did this testing. I appreciate everyone that's watched this far into the video, and thank you very, very much for following the channel.